Hey, it's Flango. This is the third place deck in the tournament, the most recent tournament. Yeah. So this is Deep Space. That's the king. This was Zenith Shadows deck. Um, Ephemeral Garden, three of them. It's just a mana card. You can drop it. You can run around. Wraithblade times three. Pretty sure this is an aggro deck, which would explain the Wraithblade. You can also afford it with Deep Space because you have regen. Same reason why you run Wraithblade with a Bog Dweller deck. Wait, this deck beat a Bog Dweller deck? Alright, well, they ran one explosion. Um, I assume that's like reach. Doing 20 damage is pretty good. Plus, I mean, technically it only takes 10 turns to heal it all back up. So, I don't know. That's something. He might be running Oasises. No, he's not. I don't know then. But yeah, so one explosion, sure. I think it's probably just to finish enemies. It is the cheapest way to do that much damage. You can use it like to beat Swarm, but I don't think I've seen a Swarm deck in a while. I don't think it's going to be a thing. One wings, probably to try to beat stuff like Bog Dweller. That's probably the big one. But as we've already kind of spoken about, it doesn't work very well against Taurus Dragon, even Zera. Sorry. Azrael, same thing. Star Eater, same thing. So this is definitely not the even Crypt King, right? Anyways, this is definitely not what I would like. This is definitely not a tech that I would say worked throughout the tournament. But it's not a terrible card. I just think that in a lot of cases, Sludge is better in this meta. However, we will very possibly change that, and it's probably just being run because Bog Dweller was predicted to be common, and well, it was. So Sludge, yeah, this card is amazing. Finishes games, protects you, does both at the same time. It turns everything around. It's better against Bog Dweller than Wings is in some ways. Um, yeah, it's very good against like cards that are super mobile, like Dream Drake, which has since disappeared from the meta, I guess. But I haven't. I'll talk about my meta thoughts at the end of this whole series. So in what, like 17 days? um, but yeah, so Sludge is just probably the card of the meta. Like when you're facing cards that can run away quickly, like Zera, Taurus Dragon, um, yeah, stuff like that. It even lets you go into well, it's also great against Deep Space, but what's that card? Star Eater. That's the one that I was talking about for Wings, actually. Um, Sludge is amazing against Star Eater because it means the Star Eater can't do any of his moves. So yeah, Sludge is a solid card. I'm actually a little bit upset to only see one, but we'll get to my changes later. Okay, so we're looking at two Nebulous. They regen, so I'm okay with that. But also, I don't know. Omnislash is 9. It's a lot of damage. But it's hard for you to just drop Nebulous and run away, right? It's not so bad. I'm assuming we're gonna see Geomancer too. Yeah, we are. Okay. So there's a lot of explodey cards in this deck. That's sort of how it works. Again, Geomancer, you can drop it and walk away. Nebulous is just a cheaper Geomancer in a lot of ways. It does have health, which can help, but Geomancer does more in a lot of cases. The last one is Stardust Regent. Okay, this is kind of like the Weave deck I made, I think. Where basically he's gonna go in, do damage with like Nebulous, stuff like that, retreat into where his Stardust Regent is, and just survive in there for a little bit. Stuff like that, I guess. It's kind of a weird deck. I'm missing a card. Which one am I missing? Oh yeah, Barrier. Yes, yes, yes. You have to run Barrier. I agree. So yeah, this is a neat deck. Um, it's kind of like Bog Dweller, except it's different in a lot of ways, obviously. I like the overarching concept. I'm interested to see what mana was like. You can put a Wraithblade on your Deep Space and kill things with Deep Space for mana. But if you're not doing that, Ephemeral Garden can be a little bit slow, and Regent is pretty expensive. I don't mind the idea of Regent though. Like it's 19 damage at a range. A lot of these cards seem to be here for reach, right? But Sledge is probably the best reach. So like I'm not opposed to running some Ephemeral Gardens, but I'd definitely run like a Sledge 3 of. Um oh sorry, not Ephemeral Garden. I meant Regent. And this is just a lot of self damage. So I would either get rid of the Geomancers because they are a little bit expensive. And I don't know, like, the way I play, I probably would never end up actually playing Regent. Because I'm not getting very much mana per turn. And Geomancer does more damage. And it does feel a little bit out of place to have, like, I mean, I guess these are all reach cards, but, like, we have reach cards that cost 20, basically. Is there any way, like, even Explosion is a reach card, which costs way less. Like, you could just replace this with Explosion and do the same damage in one turn. But Regent is nice to have. Like, I'm not I'm not saying it's worthless at all. I like the idea of having a shoot that you can keep. It helps you scale a little bit if that's something you need to do. So you can kind of control a lot of board if you're not going for like direct aggro on the king. You can control a lot of board with Nebulous Geomancer. Now at some point this deck is going to have like a point that you'll hit where you now just win. And then you hit the king only, right? But before that happens, then sure. I could see like slowly grind up, kill weak stuff with Nebulous. But the problem is that against a lot of decks, like all the ones we've seen so far, the Zera deck, the Taurus Dragon deck, the later you go, the more disadvantaged you are. You're never gonna kill anything with Nebulous because Psycho Fiend, or not Psycho Fiend. Psycho Fiend you can actually kill with Geomancer, but Shadow Lurker just has so much health, right? So Nebulous is not going to kill it alone. Working with Deep Space, it might do something, but then you're taking damage that you don't really need to take. Um, hmm. In this sort of meta, I don't even know if Geomancer's all that good. I'd keep it, but I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably keep it. And like, probably at the end of the day, if I'm not like super researching into this deck, like if I'm just playing a tournament for a card game that has, or for like a tournament with 17 entrants, right? Like it's probably not. In the end, I don't think I would make much changes, but I'm here, and that's my job, is to be nitpicky. So, Kaze is an interesting idea instead of Geomancer. Doesn't cost too much more, it gives you the Tornado instead. Tornado can move things to protect you from like stuff like Shadow Lurker, for example, cannot hit you after it's been moved away from you. It's only a single move, right? And it's kind of the cheapest force in the game that you can use to just you can move stuff like Taurus Dragons and Death from Beyond. Well, there's not any of those, but you know. That said, when we get later down the list, there's not going to be any of those. So it's a question of like, what would you'd be moving Bog Dweller. Kaze can act as a bodyguard in a lot of ways, though. So it's hard to super judge it, but like that would be a card to consider. Let's start by cost here. Is there nothing better than Nebulous? I feel like I don't know. So is this yeah? Gonna just Eunice, I guess, for now. Yeah, I feel like a card like Castle Knight can give you solid king damage, and like when you're aggro, you kind of just want to go full aggro, I think. It's hard to say though. Like again, I haven't played this deck against the meta, and it's hard to say what's best in a deck. But I wonder if first of all something like Soul Stealer, where you can get more mana, um, it would let you keep your regent in the deck. Second of all, some sort of Oasis, if you're gonna actually try to control and weave. But if you're not, I think we can get rid of wings. We can add another explosion. Well, do we just have the explosion actually? Well, we have one explosion, one region. Yeah, no, I would just go explode. Do I not? Oh, I'm on units. That's why. This is decent reach on its own. Now we just need cards that can hit the sledged card, right? Nebulous and Geomancer are gonna hurt you while they hit, and that's not what we want. Sorry, I'm having a lot of problems with some acid reflux right now, so I've been yeah. Okay. So my go-tos are always cards like Griffin, but I'm thinking about like, so if we're worried about Bog Dweller and like Vile Bog stuff, then like we could actually just run Parasitic Wasp. It's not too bad. How much health does Great Monarch have again? 17. Right, so we can't actually kill it in one turn. So then, yeah. I'm thinking like Icarus could be okay against demons, but I don't. You don't have a Demon King, so it doesn't actually slow down their Dark Deal. Because demons always has a Demon King. So yeah, no. Same thing with Soul Stealer in a sense. It's almost worse against demons because it gives them something to steal. So in a lot of ways, I think Griffin might be like the best sort of card for doing that. Or Parasitic Wasp if you're expecting some sort of terrain. You can also think about Skeleton Warrior. It lets you kind of scale a little bit later. It's a really big burst later. Or Castle Knight again is good. So, yeah, I think I'm at the point where I think Nebulous is worse than Castle Knight. You could run 2 or 3 Castle Knight. Either way. If you want the extra card slot, you could keep it at 2. If you run 3, it's harder. But Castle Knight is a card that you can kill with your Wraithbladed Deep Space Warrior if you need more mana. Of course, I've made this mana a lot more streamlined, and if you find that you have too much mana, by all means put in another regent. But I would also maybe say that Chimera is better. can't find the card. Here it is. So it's cheaper than Regent, and that in itself is useful. It does do a little bit less, but it has really good movement. Um, yeah, that. It's actually like flat out worse HP and stuff, but it has good movement and chase, right? So you don't have to like deal with them getting out of range. Yeah, that's sort of all I have to say about that. It does have to deal with blocking, but you have enough reach with explosion. So yeah, I think Chimera might be an acceptable one to try. Raiden's not too bad too, but it's harder to justify off of Wasteland, but you can kill things like Great Monarch and keep moving around and killing things. Problem is just that it gets stolen by demon decks. And like if you're worried about demon, which you could be, very well could be, then something like with a little bit more damage, I don't know, you're not really trying to kill the Shadow Lurkers. So yeah, no. And if you find like that Chimera and stuff aren't and whatever what's the other card? Regent aren't cutting it for you, you can actually run like one of on Taurus Dragon or Death from Beyond. It's like a pretty good like I pay 51 mana and I hit you really hard, you know? So anyways, all this is basically to say like you can I don't know, you can make stuff work with cheaper and it might streamline the deck a little bit more. I think I'd keep Geomancer in this case because it's good for mana. If you wanted to like keep the Regent though, I don't know, I'm not gonna find it apparently. Is it just Regent? Yeah, okay. If you wanted to keep the Regent instead, then yeah, I would drop Geomancer. And I'd probably just play Castle Knight again. But yeah, um, not a terrible deck at all. It's pretty solid aggro. I think that some cards like Regent are a little bit weird, but acceptable. I don't know how many Shadow Lurkers kill a Regent though. 17. Okay, so it survives two Shadow Lurkers and like a little bit. So not two Shadow Lurkers and an Icarus, but definitely two Shadow Lurkers and a Queen of Thorns. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I think Chimera survives. Does it survive three Shadow Lurkers? 17 times 3 is what? 30, 50? Yeah, no. Not at all. Okay. So, yeah. I think this is, like, not a bad deck. It's probably not my style. I don't like Deep Space. Although I don't have, like, huge problems with it. It's not that bad of a deck. Or, of a, like, of a king. I think Regent is a little bit weird. Um, I think something like Castle Knight is a good go-to card. And that's sort of about it. It did very well. So I mean, I can't say all negative about this deck at all. It's just that yeah, I'd like to see more sludgy cards and maybe a more streamlined list, if that makes sense. You could I think also it's worth saying that like two explosion, two sludge, and one wings isn't so bad either. But just running one sludge feels a little bit weird, even though you do usually kill with the sludge. If you're going to be expecting to be able to afford a regent, then you might as well just play sludge earlier and then you can kill it twice. Or like you can play it twice, right? And it's not like it's overkill to have two sludge because every time you sludge you do a whole bunch of damage and you deny a whole bunch of damage. And you can kill non-kings with sludge if you have more, right? You don't have to always kill kings with sludge. But I do recommend just killing kings with sludge. When your king does, what, 15 plus... Is this 6 now? Yeah. So 15 plus 6, so 19 damage. Could do 25. Might as well use sludge and get 50 damage out of it, you know? Alright, so anyways, that's been my take on this deck. Not terrible. Not exactly my style of aggro, but it's pretty solid. Okay, where do I see this being in the meta? Yeah, I see it being in the meta. Like, I feel like this is the first aggro deck we've seen. You could argue, like, people will have their opinions on Dark Deal, whether they think it's aggro or mid-rangey. I think it's like a tempo mid-range. Yeah, I would say that this for sure is like the first aggro deck we've seen, and probably will be one of the best aggro archetypes in the game for a good amount of time. Deep Space is obviously the only way you can hit your opponent on the first turn, so far. Well, I guess that's not exactly true. I think there's like a Hori Verde card that, like, oh yeah, I don't have it, but it's the epic one. But it doesn't count. Deep Space is the only good king that hits the opponent on the first turn, so that's neat. And I think you've got more or less the amount of support that I would expect in a Deep Space deck. Okay, actually, I'm sorry, I have a lot to say. If it were actually my deck, I don't know that I would run 3 barriers. You might need to, with the presence of like hard hitting cards, being at the top at least. So you'll expect a meta where hard hitting cards are common, and so barriers are really good. But I might actually play it without any of this slow stuff. Get sludge. And forget explosion. And get like Griffin. Right? And that's just more damage. But anyways, that's enough. I feel like this deck has more or less the amount of support that you would want in this deck, and it's definitely a pretty solid direction to take this archetype. Thanks for watching.